In every century, the world reshaped itself through war, moments where humanity stood on the edge of change, where decisions made in smoke-filled rooms and battlefields decided the fate of millions. Welcome to History of Conflicts. Here, we travel through time to uncover the wars that defined empires, shattered nations, and forged the world we live in today. From the trenches of World War I to the battlefields of the modern age, every story reveals not just how wars were fought, but why they began. This is not just history. This is the story of power, ambition, and the human cost of progress. For the men at the front, the war became routine, a grim, exhausting rhythm of fear, duty, and endurance. The trenches were not just lines on a map. They were worlds unto themselves. Mud was everywhere. It clung to boots, soaked into uniforms, filled rifles, and swallowed men whole. Rats thrived in the darkness, feeding on scraps and the dead. Lice infested every seam of clothing. The smell of decay, unwashed bodies, and gunpowder never faded. Each day brought the same uncertain routine. Stand to before dawn, endless waiting, the constant watch for snipers, and the sudden thunder of shellfire. Sleep came in snatches, food arrived cold or spoiled, and letters from home were treasures. Yet even in this hellish environment, soldiers adapted. They built dugouts, shared jokes, brewed tea over small fires, and marked holidays as best they could. Camaraderie was their armor. The man beside you mattered more than any flag or general. Propaganda back home painted them as heroes living noble lives. In truth, they were survivors in a world stripped of glory. The trenches were the great equalizer. Officers and laborers, farmers and students, all reduced to the same struggle for survival. The industrial age had created a human machine of war, millions of individuals caught in a system that valued endurance over victory. While soldiers fought at the front, civilians fought a different battle at home. The war reached into every home, every factory, every meal. Governments took control of economies, rationing food and fuel, directing industry toward the production of weapons, shells, and uniforms. In Britain, women filled the roles men had left behind, working in munitions factories, driving trams, nursing the wounded. Across Europe, propaganda urged citizens to sacrifice, to work longer hours, to give everything for the cause. But behind the slogans were hunger and hardship. Prices rose, wages lagged, and shortages bit hard. Families received telegrams instead of letters, news of deaths that came faster than mail could travel. The emotional toll was immense. Censorship kept spirits high, but whispers spread of the true cost. The longer the war dragged on, the more people began to ask, for what? For many, the war blurred the line between battlefield and home. Cities were bombed for the first time by airships. The ocean became a battleground where submarines hunted supply ships. The world of civilians and soldiers merged into one vast front line of endurance. The home front was not a place of safety. It was the engine that kept the war alive. Though the war began in Europe, its reach became truly global. Empires drew on their colonies for soldiers, laborers, and resources. From India, hundreds of thousands joined the British Army. From Africa, men were conscripted to fight or carry supplies through disease-ridden jungles. From Canada, Australia, and New Zealand came troops who would leave their mark on battlefields far from home. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire fought to defend its lands against British and Arab forces. The desert became a new kind of battleground. In East Africa, small forces fought long, mobile campaigns that would outlast the main war itself. Japan, seeking influence in Asia, joined the Allies and seized German colonies in the Pacific. The war became a contest not just of armies, but of empires. Even across the Atlantic, the United States felt the tremors. At first, America stayed neutral, selling goods to both sides. But as submarine warfare intensified and ships were sunk, public opinion began to shift. The war's global nature revealed the scale of human interconnection, a web of trade, empire, and ambition so vast that a crisis in one city could draw in continents. By 1916, no one could claim the war was European anymore. It was the world's first truly global conflict, fought across deserts, oceans, jungles, and skies. By the middle of the war, optimism had vanished. Both sides had suffered millions of casualties, and yet the front lines barely moved. The year 1916 became a symbol of futility and transformation. At Verdun, France fought to hold its ground against a relentless German assault. For 10 months, the battle raged, consuming hundreds of thousands of lives. Verdun became less a place and more a test of national will. "They shall not pass," the French declared. Meanwhile, the British launched an offensive on the Somme. On the first day alone, nearly 60,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded. The new weapon of the tank made its debut there, slow and unreliable, but signaling a glimpse of future warfare. Far from the front, revolts and unrest grew. In Russia, discontent boiled over. The Tsar's government, strained by defeats and shortages, faced rebellion at home. In 1917, revolution would topple centuries of monarchy and redraw the balance of power. The old world was breaking apart. War had become a machine that fed on nations. Industrial production, propaganda, and manpower were its fuel. The question was no longer who would win, but who could last. Each passing month tested endurance more than strategy. Victory seemed distant. Survival became the only goal. In 1917, a new player entered the battlefield, the United States. For years, President Woodrow Wilson had tried to keep America neutral. The nation was divided, with many immigrants from both Allied and Central Power nations. But the sinking of ships by German submarines, including those carrying civilians, changed public opinion. Then came the intercepted Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed an alliance with Mexico against the United States. It was the final straw. In April 1917, America declared war on Germany. The US was unprepared for a massive land war, but its industrial might and fresh manpower promised a decisive edge. Millions of American soldiers would cross the Atlantic in the months to come. Their arrival lifted Allied morale and changed the tone of the war. It was no longer just an old European struggle. It had become a confrontation between old empires and a rising modern power. For the first time, the United States stepped onto the world stage not as an observer, but as a leader. The age of isolation was ending. The age of global influence was beginning. But even with new allies, the road to victory was far from clear. The world was bleeding, exhausted, and waiting for an end that still felt distant. By 1917 and 1918, the war's strain was cracking the foundations of the old empires. Austria-Hungary, stretched thin and burdened by its diverse population, was collapsing from within. Ethnic tensions that had long simmered now erupted. Czechs, Slovaks, Croats, and others no longer wanted to fight for an empire that denied them independence. The idea of empire itself was dying on the battlefields of Europe. The Ottoman Empire was crumbling as well. In the Middle East, Arab revolts, inspired and supported by Britain, were breaking Ottoman control. From the deserts of Arabia to the streets of Damascus, the map was changing. And then there was Russia. The war had drained its economy and exposed the deep inequalities of its society. Soldiers deserted in droves. Food was scarce. Protests grew into revolution. By the end of 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power. Russia, once a giant of the Allied cause, withdrew from the war entirely, signing a separate peace with Germany. That withdrawal freed German forces to focus on the Western Front, but it also meant that the ideals of monarchy and empire were collapsing across Europe. The Great War had not just redrawn borders, it was tearing down the very systems that had ruled for centuries. With Russia out of the war, Germany saw one last chance to win before American forces could fully arrive. In the spring of 1918, it launched a massive offensive on the Western Front. The German army advanced with speed and power, pushing the Allies back further than they had in years. It seemed, for a moment, that victory was within reach, but the push came at a terrible cost. Supply lines stretched thin, morale weakened, and the new American divisions began to arrive in force. By summer, the tide turned. The Allies counterattacked in the Second Battle of the Marne, using tanks, aircraft, and fresh troops to push the Germans back. The momentum shifted. Germany's allies, the Austro-Hungarians, the Ottomans, and the Bulgarians, began to collapse one by one. At home, German cities were starving. Workers went on strike. Soldiers mutinied. The empire that had marched so confidently into war was now unraveling from within. By autumn, the German high command knew the end was near. The war that was meant to be swift and decisive had lasted over 4 years. It had consumed millions of lives and reshaped the planet. And so, under pressure from revolution at home and defeat abroad, Germany sought peace. On November 11, 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns finally fell silent. The armistice ended the fighting, but it did not bring peace, not yet. The cost was too vast to measure. Nearly 10 million soldiers were dead, and millions more civilians had perished from famine, disease, and displacement. Entire landscapes were shattered. Towns had become ruins. Generations had been scarred forever. Across Europe, crowds poured into the streets to celebrate the end of war. Bells rang, flags waved. But even in victory, there was exhaustion more than joy. The world had been changed in ways that few could yet comprehend. In Germany, the Kaiser fled into exile. A new republic was declared. Across the former empires, revolutions erupted. Borders were redrawn almost overnight. The war to end all wars had left behind broken nations and unhealed wounds. The victors would soon gather in Paris to decide what the new world should look like. But their decisions would plant the seeds of another conflict yet to come. In 1919, world leaders met in Paris to shape the post-war world. The Treaty of Versailles was meant to ensure lasting peace, but it became one of the most controversial documents in modern history. France demanded harsh penalties on Germany, reparations, territorial losses, and disarmament to make sure such a war could never happen again. Britain sought balance, wary of pushing Germany too far, but still eager to secure its empire. The United States, under President Wilson, arrived with a vision of peace based on self-determination and a new League of Nations to prevent future wars. But ideals clashed with anger and fear. The final treaty blamed Germany for the war entirely, imposed crushing reparations, and stripped it of territory and pride. For many Germans, it felt like humiliation disguised as peace. Across Europe, new nations emerged from the ruins of empires: Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. The Middle East was carved into mandates under European control. The map looked new, but the resentments beneath it were old. The Treaty of Versailles ended the fighting, but it did not end the struggle. It left bitterness, instability, and a dangerous sense of unfinished business that would erupt again 2 decades later. The war that had been called the war to end all wars had in truth only begun to reshape the world's conflicts. When the war began in 1914, few could imagine what the world would look like afterward. By 1918, the old order was gone. Monarchies had fallen. Empires had shattered. The balance of power that had defined Europe for centuries was gone forever. The war ushered in a new age of democracy and revolution, of machines and modernity, of uncertainty and fear. It was a dawn that came not with sunlight, but with smoke. Technology had changed humanity's relationship with death. Machine guns, tanks, and aircraft had turned killing into industry. Propaganda had turned truth into a weapon. The war had revealed both the brilliance and the brutality of the modern age. For those who lived through it, the memories never faded. The trenches, the gas, the endless waiting, these became symbols of a world that had lost its innocence. Writers, poets, and artists tried to make sense of what they had seen. Their works spoke not of glory, but of disillusionment. The Great War shaped the 20th century. It gave birth to new nations and new ideologies. It set the stage for revolutions, for totalitarianism, and for another world war that would dwarf even its horrors. Yet amid the destruction, there were lessons about the cost of pride, the fragility of peace, and the resilience of those who endure. The dawn of World War I was not just the beginning of conflict. It was the beginning of the modern world, a world forever haunted by the echoes of that first global catastrophe. The past is never silent. Its echoes live on in our world today, in borders, in politics, in the way nations rise and fall. If you've learned something new, or if this story made you see history differently, make sure to subscribe to History of Conflicts. Every week, we uncover another turning point, another war, another decision, another moment that changed everything. Because understanding conflict isn't just about the past. It's about seeing the patterns that shape our future. Every war leaves a scar. Every story leaves a lesson. Subscribe to History of Conflicts and discover how history still fights to shape our world today.